Hey, welcome to the Bible and today's culture. Just to remind you, we're dealing with a 40,000-foot view. We're trying to understand the principles that God has given us about the culture that we live in and how we can affect it and how much He cares for everything. So we're assuming you really value the Bible. This is not an apologetics class trying to convince you the Bible is true. We're assuming you believe that already. And we want to get into God's thinking, into His mind, and the Bible says we are to have the mind of Christ. We're to think like Him. So that's what we're doing here today. So we're starting a new domain called Science and Health. And here we go. What's this? It's ice cream. Yay. And so what brand of ice cream is this? Okay. Baskin Robbins, right? So how many flavors are there at Baskin Robbins? 31. But if you're like me and love Rocky Road ice cream and go to Baskin Robbins every chance I get, I had never seen that the number of flavors was in the logo on there. So this is something we're going to face today. We have been reading the Bible for years and years and years, and there's some things we have never seen before. And which is one of the reasons I suggest we start coloring the Bible uh, with the colors used in domains. And so the domain of science and health is light blue, and we're going to see some things that should be colored light blue in your Bible that neither you or I, for years and years, ever saw. So here we go. We're going to talk about purposeful rituals. Try to say that fast. Disease prevention. Um, so this one is a verse that most people never read unless they agree to read through the whole Bible in a year, and they feel guilty skipping some verses, so they just trudge through this thing. And it says it's really boring, and their challenge is to stay awake till they get to the end of this section. So that's your challenge, okay? It's going to be worth it. Hang in there, stay awake, because I'm going to read to you this intriguing verse that you will fall asleep on. Okay, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "There is another ritual law required by the Lord. Tell the people of Israel to bring you a red heifer that has no physical defects and has never been yoked to a plow. Give it to Eleazar the priest, and it will be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. Eleazar will take some of its blood on his finger and sprinkle it 7 times toward the front of the tabernacle." All right, are you awake? I mean, this is really compelling, right? No way you can fall asleep on this. All right, but I'm going to give you a clue. The clue is this is a recipe. Okay, starting with verse 5 over there. As Eleazar watches, the heifer must be burned, its hide, its meat, its blood, its dung. Eleazar the priest must then take cedar wood, a hyssop branch, and scarlet thread, and throw them into the fire where the heifer is burning. Then someone who is ceremonially clean will gather up the ashes of the heifer and place them in a purified place outside the camp. They will be kept there for the people of Israel to use in the water of purification ceremony. Now, admit, if you had to read that, you probably wouldn't finish it. But what's it all about? Okay, here's the answer. And the answer is kind of long, but I think you'll understand it better. The water of purification. When we look at the ingredients individually, we begin to see the value of each. First, consider the ashes of the red heifer. As most school children know, the pioneers in this country could not go to the nearest supermarket to buy their favorite personal hygiene products. If they needed soap or shampoo, they made it themselves. Under such situations, they concocted various recipes for soap. One of the most oft-produced types of soap was Lye Soap. Particularly anyone today can easily obtain a recipe for Lye Soap via a quick search on the internet. The various Lye Soap recipes reveal that to obtain lye, water was poured through the ashes. The water retrieved from pouring it through the ashes contained a concentration of lye. Lye, in high concentrations, is very caustic and irritating to the skin. It is, in fact, one of the main ingredients in modern day chemical mixtures used to unclog drains. In most diluted concentrations, it can be used as an excellent exfoliant and cleansing agent. Many of the companies today still produce Lye Soap. Amazing! Through God's inspiration, Moses instructed Israel to prepare a mixture that would have included a lye mixed in a diluted solution. Okay, so what we just saw in Numbers chapter 19 was how to produce a soap. This isn't unusual than what we've done here in COVID that we've just gone through. What the instructions were: wash your hands a lot in warm water with soap for 20 seconds. Basically, this is the same instruction. There's a few more things that we haven't talked on. One is it said in what I read to you from 19 that hyssop contains an antiseptic still used in mouthwash. So this was added to this soap. The oil from the cedar wood in the mixture provides a minor skin irritant that would have encouraged scrubbing. And finally, scarlet wool made the ingredients an ancient equivalent of lava soap. All right, so why should they use this? What's the purpose for doing all of this? So when to use the water of purification? We're just going to read more of 19 in the red section. All those who touch a dead human body will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days. They must purify themselves on the third and seventh days with the water of purification that we've just made, and they will be purified. Okay, just like we did for COVID disease. When I was in Israel a number of years ago, I ran into something that a lot of people don't see. I think it's fairly new. And it's called Herod's Palaces. And in 1967, there was a war where Egypt, Jordan, and Syria all joined up and attacked Israel from different directions. Well, Israel ended up winning the war. And as they were chasing the enemy out of their country, the Jordanians owned a large part of Jerusalem. And as they fled and left, they decided they would blow it up and not leave it for the Israelites, for the Jews. And so they blew up this hillside that overlooked where the temple used to be. So when they began to clean this up, and they were in fact going to build a hotel in this blown up area, they began to dig down for the foundation of the hotel. And they discovered an archaeological site that no one had ever known was there under the city before, a couple hundred feet, a couple of dozen feet below the current level of the earth. And they came upon the palaces of the wealthy people in 2000 at Christ's time, and they were living. This was the best real estate in Jerusalem because it overlooked the new temple that Herod the Great had built. So this is a mock-up of what archaeologists discovered. And those two arrows point to two baths with the water of purification that they made, we just read about in Numbers 19. So for 1,500 years after Moses gave those instructions, the Jews were still taking him serious, and they had two baths. So we got, 2, 3, 4 baths in our houses today. They had two baths, okay, same thing. And this is what the actual archaeological site looked like. So here's steps going down to the bath, which is over there, the dark area. You turn the corner, you go down more steps, and you get into the bath, and the water would have been 3 or 4 feet deep, and it would be this diluted lye structure, and they would bathe themselves. And they'd gotten more serious about doing this, and these people that had these homes would do it 2 or 3 times a day. So a few years ago, I was in Cologne and was going to see their great cathedral. And on the way to it, we ran into a fence that blocked our way. And this sign was on the fence. It said, Excavation of the medieval synagogue and the Jewish quarter. Down here it says, Europe's oldest synagogue, the Jewish quarter, and the older Roman remains are now being excavated. So, this is what I was looking at. This is the archaeological spot. And there's the green arrow, and it's pointing to a circle. And I asked somebody what that was. And they said, oh, well, that's the Jewish baths. And I went, oh, this begins to make sense. So this synagogue existed in the 1400s. From 1347 to 1353 was the Black Plague in Europe. And this plague killed up to 50% of the population of Europe. It makes COVID look like a small cold. And so what happened was Christians were dying, like up to 50% of the Christians were dying, but the Jews weren't dying. So the myth was developed that the Jews were serving a different God. Of course, the Christians were serving the right God, right? But the Jews were serving some other God that was protecting them from this disease. So they nicknamed the Jewish people children of the devil. So here, 3,000 years after Moses, they're still practicing water of purification baths. Now, the Jews and the Christians were reading the same Bible. They all had Numbers 19 chapter. And what was happening is that the Jews, when they carried out the dead bodies of the Jews that died to the graveyard, they would come back and bathe in this lye soap bath. And it would kill the germs, and they weren't dying as much. But the Christians didn't take Numbers 19 seriously, and they died. So the mind of God is that He wants us to be healthy, and He wants to prevent us from illness. So one of the things we're going to learn in this study of science is that God prefers healthiness over miracles to make us healthy. He prefers health prevention, such as the lye bath. So let's look at another situation called sanitation. It's another verse that we don't often read, but it really has great implications for the world today. So here's the verse. It comes from Deuteronomy 23, and it says, designate a place outside the camp where you can go to relieve yourself. As part of your equipment, have something to dig with. And when you relieve yourself, dig a hole and cover up your excrement. So what was going on? There were 3.5 million people in the desert after they had escaped from Egypt. And if they didn't have a plan for their sewage system, their camp would be a mess. It would be smelly. It would be disease-filled. There would be insects. And God is giving them a plan for sewage. And much of the world needs to hear this verse today.
The teeming slums of Bombay. To witness life here is to doubt that India could ever drag itself out of the misery of poverty and deprivation. Children play alongside open sewers. The drinking water is polluted. Rubbish piles up and festers in the heat. Diseases such as typhoid are a constant threat. Yet the local clinic is closed because funds haven't arrived from the municipality. A child who will grow up here in the next century has plenty to cry about.
If some of you saw the film Slumdog Millionaire, you would remember the opening scene. They were walking on a wood walkway on stilts out over the tidal ponds near a slum. And the people would walk on this woodway, and there was a toilet at the end. And their sewage would drop down in the ponds. I was near that one time when I was in India. and the tidal ponds would fill up with high tide, and that sewage would wash around the area where the people lived. The, the world needs to listen to that message of what do we do with our sewage. It's in the character of God to keep us healthy. So here's a slum that I was in when I was in India helping develop a school. Now this is an upgraded sewage system. It has curbs along it, and there's cement bottom to where the sewage runs. But the children play near it. The first day that my wife and I were in India, we were in a village where it was all dirt, and the sewage ran just along the dirt, and the houses were only 15 feet apart. So they had laid cement, broken pieces of cement there, and we were stepping from them over the top of the sewer to get where we wanted to go. It was amazing. Veda here is a friend of mine that I was meeting that first time I was in India, and I've been 5 times to India to meet with people like Veda. And a few months ago, he sent me an email with some pictures that their septic tank had broken down. And here he's trying to wash away the sewage so it isn't affected. And what he's doing is he's running a home for elderly, destitute adults and orphan children, about 100 people. And he's trying to keep it clean, having had his septic tank break. And this is what he said in his letter to me. It's not very clear English. Hang in there. Our home septic tank problem. We have ordinary 3 septic tanks. Every 2 months the tanks would overflow, and we have to clean. And so much mosquitoes and spread of sickness. No clean, bad smell. For cleaning, more cost. The village complaint that our bore well is mixing the septic tank water. Well, he also sent me pictures of his foot from working in the sewage to try to keep the place clean. He has sores on him. Here's pictures of his hands. So, having read Deuteronomy 23, I knew this was a serious problem and God wanted me to do something about it. I had him talk to a contractor. It came up they needed $1,800 to put in a new septic tank system. Money goes a long ways in India. American money goes a long ways. So I sent him $1,800. He's fixed it up, and they now have a clean place to live. You probably remember Jean-Marc and Martine Fritsch in Madagascar. This is a part of my trip to Madagascar that they didn't show you before. They, like most modern missionaries, are getting people to build toilet systems. So look how clean that is. Nobody I knew knew I was coming there. It hadn't been cleaned up for me. This is the toilet. That's the lid of the toilet. That's where your feet go. And it's as clean as it can be. Remember, this is the place where people chipped in and brought rakes to clean up their village. This is how they keep their toilets. It's an indication of how they think God is concerned about every part of their camp. I was teaching this class to a group of businessmen there, and I was walking a few blocks away from my 4-star hotel when I ran into this sewage ditch. It was near a house like this. It just wasn't in the poor area. All of Jakarta faced this. There are the pipes that show the raw sewage running into this ditch. I found out that Jakarta is the largest capital city in the world, or the only capital city in the world, that does not have a sewage system. And I wondered, where does this flow to? Later on, when I flew out of town, I kept my eyes on the sewage ditches and where they went. And I saw that they ran out to the ocean. And as I looked down from the plane, I could see the dark water for miles out into the ocean. So I hope all of you are reading Landa Cope's book, The Old Testament Templates, a wonderful supplement to everything that we're saying. And she tells a story that happened to her as she was teaching this particular class on sanitation. After the class, a guy came up to her and he was in tears. And she says, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Well, my problem is my brother's a missionary, and everybody always compliments him on what he's doing with his life, but no one ever compliments me." She says, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm a sewage engineer." All of a sudden, he had recognized God's calling on his life. It's what is natural for him all the time to do. But in our sacred, secular, split thinking, we think missionaries are so much better than sewage engineers or any other career that we have. And he began to realize that God's care for sewage was his calling. We forget about sewage. It's under the streets, it's in pipes, but it's really necessary, and God cares about it. He cares about all our careers. So people need the wisdom from the science and health domain because God is a healer and he wants us to stay healthy. And he talks about sewage as a way of doing that. God prefers prevention over miracles. Okay, he doesn't want to come in and solve our financial problems. He wants us to not get sick in the first place. Science demands order. We'll learn more about that. And the Bible is largely application. These are the things we're going to look at in the domain of science and health, and you'll see them coming up. Right now, here's some discussion questions for you to get involved in the science and health domain. So read these questions, take some time to answer them. When you're done, I hope you take time to look at a fantastic video called From Conception to Birth. Next class, we're going to talk more about germs and infections. Enjoy your discussions. We'll see you next class. Thanks.